Welcome to the Brain Crops podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Myers, and today I am delighted to be joined with my friend, Fred Joyal. Fred, welcome to the show.
Chelsea, thanks for having me. I look forward to this conversation.
Me too. And actually, you're one of those people. There are a few people in my life that I'm like, your name just is so perfect for you. But I love that you have joy in your name because you really do a great job of just authentically spreading this essence in all of our conversations, even ones that have been a more heavier topic. You have this lightness about the way that you are approaching it. And we're going to get into that some of this conversation, but I'm just so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Somebody once called me recently Fred Joyful. And I thought, how is it that I've never thought of that before? But I immediately bought the domain name. So,
Perfect. I love
yeah.
that. Yes. And yeah, and it works perfectly with all of the work that you do for our audience here. Fred is an author, an entrepreneur, and a keynote speaker. He founded 1-800 Dentists and now speaks on the superpower of being bold. And so I would love to boldness. So I would love
Yes.
to talk to you about boldness and all of these things, but I just said a lot there. Would you mind giving us just a little bit of background, the parts that you want to share about your professional and personal history?
So I came up in the advertising world. That was the first real job I had, and where I really found my niche. I found what I wanted to do. And then that led to starting a marketing company for dentists that many people have heard of. We were on television for 30 years, finding patients for dentists nationwide. We were the largest referral service in the country. And I started with a very close friend of mine back in 1986. And a personal coach of mine once said, "Did you ever add up how much revenue you generated? Like if you added up every year?" And I said, "No, I never really thought about it that way." And he said, "Well, do it." And it was a billion two. And he said,
Oh, wow.
"Do you realize how few people have generated that much revenue in a company?" And I said, "Yeah, but we spent like a billion four, so it's a problem, you know." It's like, uh, but yeah, it was way more successful than we imagined, and really we created a great culture, and I had a real family of 250 people who considered it the best job they ever had. They loved coming to work, and I loved having them work with me. They made me very successful, and I gave them a great place to work, and it just worked out incredibly. Wrote a couple of books on dental practice marketing. Everything is marketing, and becoming remarkable. And those kind of became the marketing Bibles of the industry. And I began speaking on that topic about 15 years ago. And then I really evolved once I sold 800 Dentists about 7 years ago. I really became piqued by the idea of teaching boldness to people because it's something I taught myself. Um, and I had talked to a group of high school students, and one of the things I had said to them is that boldness is a superpower, and the sooner you learn it, then the more you're going to be able to chase your dreams and have a fulfilling and satisfying life. And they said, "Yeah, that's great. How would we do that?" And so I realized I had to systematize how somebody builds boldness, just like you would build a muscle, because it's actually a life skill. It's not a personality trait. People think it is, but it's really something that anyone can learn. You can expand your boldness more and more and more. And what happens is you get rewarded for it. Opportunities come to you, fun, adventure, success, discovery, personal growth. All of that happens because you've enhanced your boldness, which gave you the confidence to take more action. So
Mm.
that's what I speak on now. That's what I speak to all different businesses and coach individuals on it, usually executives on it. So that's the arc of my life at this point.
And what a powerful thing you said you went in and taught teenagers, because I have a bushel of children. And
Yes.
I know that sometimes I was a teenager. I know that sometimes, in that mindset, and that just, lots of things playing into how we are at that time. Right. But,
Yeah.
you may think that you're being bold, and you're not being bold. You're just being inappropriate, or you're being, or, you know,
Yeah.
um, presumptuous, all the things. And so how would you differentiate? And actually, as you were saying that, so I thought of the teenagers, but then I also thought, of a person that I know in my own personal life. And when she's actually a very timid person and prefers not to rock the boat, but when she does exercise what she would probably call boldness, it doesn't land as bold or confident or appropriately assertive. It lands as, something else. It's not palatable, to say the least. And so, let's define that. Could we unpack that a little bit about what is boldness then, and how can we make it work for us? But to do that, we need to know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think confidence and boldness are the same thing, and it's really not. Confidence is how you feel about yourself. Boldness is the actions that you take with or without that confidence. The reality
Mm.
is, you don't need to be confident to do something bold. Most of the time, bold people are doing stuff and they're not confident about how it's going to go. But it's not about being a show off. It's not about getting attention to yourself. It's and feeling good that way. It's about taking risks and expanding yourself and going into discomfort to discover what else is out there instead of playing it safe in life, because that's what happens is people, they get worried about failure, they get worried about embarrassment. I mean, that's the thing about high school, is it annihilates half the people's self-confidence just because
Mm.
it's such a weird hormonal challenge going on. And there's so much comparison, and as we know, comparison is the thief of joy. and
Mm.
um, and there's so much of that going on, that you have to remove yourself from it and stop worrying about what other people are thinking. And your daughter may be acting weirdly or strangely or even inappropriately, but she's doing is expanding herself. She's you know discovering, she doesn't know who she wants to be yet, and so she's testing things out, which is great. This is what you should be doing. You can't worry about how you're being judged if you want to really get to the core of who you want to become, because otherwise somebody else designs your life for you.
Mm.
And this is one of the big regrets that people have in life, is they wish they had a life that they lived by their own design rather than what other people expected of them. And
Mhm.
you're when you're a teenager, you don't think long term, but as you get, but on people on their deathbed, that's what they say. They say, I wish I'd spent more time with my friends. I wish I hadn't worked so hard, and I wish I lived my life instead of somebody
Mhm.
else's, the life somebody else expected of me. And it's too late then. It's over. All you get is regret. So the idea of being bold is to take chances, take risks, discover what matters to you, what draws you to what your purpose and purposes may be. Because people say, "Oh, I got to find my purpose." Like, well, you can want to be a great wife and a great mother and a great lawyer, or a great singer, or all four of those things. So, and each one of them is fulfilling a purpose, and so they can all drive you, but you have to be willing to take the chances to make yourself into who you want to be and not worry about what other people are thinking.
Mm.
That's the long
So,
version of the answer.
yeah, and it's so good. So, a lot of us find ourselves in these situations where it feels like too late. It's never too late, right? But it feels like really late in the game we realize, okay, I chose this career, or this person in this social circle or whatever the thing is. I'm being someone else. I'm living someone else's life, trying to seek that approval or that acceptance or um, not be found out for who I really am. And so, what are some indicators that that might be what's going on in our life and that maybe we need to take a look at becoming more bold?
Well, one of the big indicators I found is that people are chasing comfort as an end
Mm.
rather than a resting place, like a rest stop. They want, oh, I just don't want to feel stressed. I want to have a comfortable car and a comfortable house and comfortable clothes and comfortable income and that comfort becomes like a cage almost where you're afraid to go out of it and what you're doing now is you're just marking time, you're running out the clock on the bench because the bench is warm and cozy, whereas the only thing satisfying about life is to get in the game and play as hard as you can and find out what you're capable of. It's, life's too short to let somebody else decide what you're capable of. Push the boundaries to find out what you're capable of. If you're not pushing yourself, if you're so afraid of failing that you never try anything, you're guaranteeing the failure of your life, basically. You're putting
Yeah.
yourself in a position where you'll look back and say, wow, I didn't take any chances. I played it safe the whole time. And that's really one of the big clues is, are you trying to be just comfortable and are you playing it safe all the time? I don't want to get in this argument with this person. I don't want to tell them what I need or what I expect from the relationship because they might get mad at me. Well, that guarantees that you're not going to get what you expect in the relationship because nobody's a mind reader. And so they do what they want to do or what they think you might want them to do in the relationship. But if you're not bold enough to say, "Hey, I really don't like it when we do this," or when you don't do that, or when you do that, and it would make our relationship better if we could change that. If you don't speak up, nothing changes. If you don't step up, nobody's coming to you with great opportunities hoping that you say yes. You have to find those opportunities, chase those opportunities, push your boundaries, get uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden you find out the universe just says, or you can call it God or the universe or whatever, that's they're waiting for you to. You've been given a life with a limited span. the, God is waiting for you to use it to the max. Run the clock out. Leave it all on the court. Leave it all on the mat. As we say, when that was the term in wrestling because I wrestled in high school. But it's like play full out because you don't know when the clock's going to stop. The coach has put you in the game. Play full out.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is often overlooked is that other people are moving targets. So while right now you may have a pretty good gauge on what they're hoping for or expecting out of you, they have their own lives and the own things that they're interested in and that are, weighing on them, stressing them. And so as soon as you conform to that, and you're walking in that straight line, something about them may change. And so now it's this like never ending moving target when you're trying to please other people. And meanwhile, you're neglecting the opportunity to get to know yourself. And I think sometimes what I've experienced in my own life is that when if I look back and see where there were opportunities for me to express some boldness or do some discovery on what needs to change to be more self-aligned, it was almost this virus of the familiar discomfort. At least I know I'm not going to die from this situation, and I know it really well. I've survived this for a year, or I've survived this for 10 years, and so no, it's not my favorite, but I am really familiar with it. But what you're describing is there's a next level for not just me, but potentially me and the company, me and the spouse, me and the, friendship, whatever that is. So talk to me about that. Let's say that there is something that's on my mind and I'm like, yeah, this dynamic has room to improve. I have an idea of what that looks like. How do I approach that situation?
If you find yourself being hesitant, if you find yourself being cautious, which is another way of saying playing it safe, you have to ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And what's the worst that could possibly happen? And then what's the worst that could happen if I don't achieve that? What if I may just maintain this? And I mean, there are certain times in your life where you have to circle the wagons and regroup and you know get stronger again. But that's so that's what your comfort zone is for. That's where your support circle is for. But it's not to go there and hide. It's to go there
Mm-hmm.
and revitalize yourself, to go back out and get in the ring and take a beating again. And
Right.
so many people are they. If you say if there's a message in this that's saying I might fail, you have to say, so what?
Mhm.
It's a really good question. People might laugh at me. So what? I might lose a lot of money. So what? If I just had the money I lost, I could probably retire. But the things that I tried taught me something.
Mhm.
I say I have the most expensive MBA possible because every class is $100,000 or 200. And but the other thing is, if and I want to circle back to this, because if you're doing it and your purpose is not about your fulfillment and your satisfaction, it's about fame or recognition, or the worst of all, just a lot of money or a lot of money and stuff, you're going to find that hollow at a certain point sooner than
Oh
you
yeah.
think. And and in America, that's a real trap, because we're inundated with advertising that says you need to measure yourself by the car you drive, and the labels on the clothing you wear, and the size watch you have, or the size ring you have, and none of that adds up to significance and real fulfillment in life. It's almost like a drug. It's like a temporary hit that you get addicted to it, and it ruins your life eventually. It ruins your joy, because there's never enough of it. There's always a bigger yacht. There's always a more expensive car. I mean, you can get buy a car for $2.5 million right now,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you can't drive it any faster than any other car because there's speed limits on the roads. But people do it. I know people with two of them. How do you
Mhm.
drive two cars at once? You can't. So, and there's only so much time you want to spend driving in a day. But
Right.
if your abundance of money is coming from your contribution, then the money's always going to be enough. I'm lucky enough to have bought stuff and realized that it added up to like 2% happier when I thought I
Mm.
really need this car. I'm gonna really enjoy this car, and I did really enjoy it. About 3 months, I'm used to it, but I still got a lease payment on it. So
Right.
it's like, just shift your focus away from the quote American dream, which is a ton of stuff, and shift it to, what's my dream? What do I care about? What's the impact I want to have? What's the how do I want to be remembered? How do I want to be appreciated right now? If I ask five people what the is of knowing me, what would they say? What do I want them to say? And that means you have to be really harsh on yourself sometimes and stop deluding yourself and stop pretending that you're using your time well
Mm,
for real fulfillment, for real satisfaction. I find that the more impact that you have on other people's life, the less money you actually need, and the more satisfying every day is. The more you climb into bed going, I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad I was able to do that.
right. Right. And when you were talking just now, I was thinking about the exercise where you make a list of your priorities from top priority to, lowest but still on the list. And then by proportion of where you spend your time, you do the same thing. Here's where I spend my time, here's where I spend the next, largest portion of my time, and you see like how well do those coincide with the bulk of time that I'm spending versus my priorities, and see if they line up or not. And a lot of times I find that they don't. And that it's really a healthy thing to do on a regular basis to make sure that, we're actually, to your point, living our own life, the life that we want to live, because there isn't, any amount of, you talked about money. There's no amount of money that, once you're, uh, my plan is to be 225 plus. So I'm 225 on my deathbed. And thinking back on my life, there's not a dollar amount that probably can go back and change, what I did when I was 40 or 60 or 80. So it's really good to have those things on your mind all of the time. So workshop with me just a little bit. Let's say like I'm like, okay, where do I start? There's this thing. Let's say I've got a friendship or a romantic relationship. There's this thing in my life, and I know that something's got to change because it's exhausting. And I have an idea of what I want to change in it, how I maybe need to change, or what maybe could be done differently so I'm receiving better. How do I approach this situation with boldness that is forward moving for the whole relationship?
So you decide what it is you want to talk about, and you prepare yourself. Now, sometimes it's preparing the words, sometimes it's preparing your state that you're in. And most of the time, it's really both. Um, so if you say, look, I- I'll pick a random thing. It's like I'm at, and if my wife came to me and she said, I really, I feel like we don't do date night. And I know that people whose marriage are really strong, they do date night every week.
Mm.
Now, for her to say that, she's, I have to not take it as an accusation.
Hmm.
So she has to prepare herself by not charging it with extra emotion, like saying, you never do date night like all my friends have.
Right.
Okay. Because now I'm under attack. Now I have to defend myself as a man.
Hmm.
Now I have to list all the things that I do, which gets
Hmm.
nowhere. So she has to balance the emotion of it and say, you know what would make me feel loved? Now this is her preparation. These words, you know what would make me feel really loved? Because you do a lot of things that make me feel loved. And I could list them all. And they really, I know that you love me. But there's this thing, like if you every week planned a date, like you were asking me out on the first or second date, and we just went somewhere that was you planning it, I would feel so loved. You would be amazed. I would stop complaining about so many things because you did that. Well, now she's selling, right? She's like, she threw in the bonus.
Uh-huh.
She's gonna dial back some of the complaints. Because we all complain to each other about all sorts of stuff. That's what you're in the relationship for. Is it's like it's a safe zone to, you know, issue your complaints on a regular basis. But what she's done is she's taken the emotion and said, I'm just gonna dial it down to what's the most loving way that I can say this. But I'm taking a big risk because Fred could still be defensive about it. It's like, oh, come on, are you kidding me? Every week? And she's got to say,
Mhm.
well, maybe let's start every 2 weeks. I'll make a deal with you. Let's start there. But I think you're probably going to enjoy it as much as I do, and you're going to enjoy being the guy who figures out where to take me, and and I get all dressed up for it. But let's try every 2 weeks. She has what she wants in mind, which is for him to willingly do this,
Mhm.
not for him to feel guilty that he's not. So she's realigned her goal, because a lot of times we forget and we express ourselves like we just want the other person to feel bad about what they're not doing. And that's not
Mhm.
really what we want. It's just the way it comes out.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that's
and
actually
this,
really I was to say, I think that's a really important point that you make because you have an entire niche on teaching people how to be bold in a way that is effective, right? But as we talked about earlier, there's all of these other adjectives you could put in that place where people are actually trying to be bold and they actually have um, a, a win-win scenario in their mind and they're trying to express that. So I think it's really important what you mentioned about recognizing that um, the delivery, you need to be an active receiver in that knowing, okay, sometimes I take things in a way that makes me defensive. I want to hear this person out and even give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not trying to put me on the defense. They're not trying to get under my skin. They probably have a more peaceful motive, even if it doesn't sound that way. I think that's really important to remember because I know that when I'm the person approaching, if I've got the concern, um, it does take a little bit of courage, even if it's a relationship that I'm very comfortable with. It takes a little bit of courage, and so I appreciate you pointing that out.
well, and that's it. There's a lot of ways to stay comfortable in a relationship by not bringing stuff up. But those are just infections that are going to grow,
Mm,
because you put them off. You didn't treat them.
mhm.
And
Right.
then what happens is, like, are you ever going to take me on a date? Are you ever going to plan
Mm-hmm.
anything ever again? Because now the infection has burst. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what the comfort, playing it safe in that comfort space. Well, I don't want to rock the boat right now. I don't want to disturb him. He's been working hard. He's stressed on work, and I don't want to add another thing to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we delay, like we've got time, and we don't. You don't have time to get to what's important. You somehow have time for Instagram, and a bag of Doritos, but you don't have time for what's important. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself why. Where did you ever see that we live forever? Because it's kind of not the message that's all around us.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a finite gift of life, and that finite being the key word. And we're in finite relationships. We don't know when that relation's going to end. It could end very tragically in a moment. I mean, I tell a story about my father, but because it's so critical, because I was not bold enough to just call my dad and tell him I loved him, which I had never said. So I sat down and I wrote a letter telling him how much I appreciated everything he had done in his life for me and all the sacrifices he made. And I wrote, "I love you," and your son. And I mailed the letter, and he died the next day. So he never, because I wasn't bold enough to just pick up the phone and say, I have to tell my dad I loved him, because I've never said it. And now I got a letter that he never got to read, to remind me that we don't have all the time in the world to get to stuff. to say what we ought to be saying, to do what we ought to be doing, to try what we ought to be trying. The clock is running, and we don't know when it's going to stop. I say I love you to my brother every time I leave him because I don't know if I'm going to see him again. I want that to be the last thing I said to him. So it's like, stop coasting. Stop thinking you'll get to it. Just get to it. Be uncomfortable. Be bold enough to step up and say, now is when I'm going to do it. Now is when I'm going to say it. And you prepare yourself, you prepare your state, you relax yourself, you focus on what you want to achieve, what the outcome is that matters to you,
Mhm.
and then you put it out there.
Yeah, and you said something earlier that just dovetails so nicely into this portion of the conversation about a willingness to be uncomfortable. When I go to the gym, I expect to put plates on the bar. I expect to be sore the next day as my muscles grow stronger and adapt to that next level of ability. And I think that you're right. We're just really conditioned to eat the foods that only taste the best, that give us, those concentrated foods, those processed foods that are, highly sweetened, highly not nutritious at all, to not work out because that doesn't feel very good. And like to your point, staying in situations that we know aren't healthiest for ourselves, they're not aligned, and they're not even ultimately healthy for the other person. But it's going to require that discomfort. And some of the work that I do, and I'm sure you run into this as well, is getting underneath so deep to find out what is that root cause. And a lot of times it's things that stem back to childhood or stem back to really old situations where we developed a belief or a coping mechanism that we believe keeps us safe, we believe buffers us from any additional pain and discomfort, but it doesn't. To your point, it's just perpetuating that cycle. Either I don't tell him I want the date, and now I'm building this resentment, or I blow up and let him know I want the date. Why aren't you doing the date? And then he does the date, and I'm like, would you have ever done it had I not blown up? Are you just avoiding a future argument, basically?
Yeah, that really sweetens the deal when you say that at the end of it. Yeah. But that's what
Right.
we do as human beings. That's what we do. We lose sight of the outcome so that we can barf, right? So we can purge ourselves of this swollen infection of dissatisfaction that we could have treated a lot earlier and a lot more gently
Mm,
and
mm,
effectively. But and
yeah.
you know, and if you don't ask for it, you're guaranteeing you're not going to get it. If you're waiting for them to have an epiphany about what it is you need, it's unlikely to happen. If this applies to work. I mean, I look at it like people, you know, in a work position, they've got a really good paying job with no satisfaction whatsoever. And what they really want to do is start a business or go work for a charitable foundation to take a 30%, 40% cut in pay because they need some joy in their life.
Mm,
But they
mhm.
let another year go by, and life is short, man. It's too late. It's too short. Life is too short to think you're going to have the time to get to your dreams next week or next month or when you have more time or more money or both so you can get to your dreams, to get to what matters.
And what
Sometimes,
a
sometimes you got to
beautiful
quit the job. You got to quit the job. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what a beautiful sentiment that you shared on, the story about your father and how that came full circle with you, not only honoring um, what you would have liked to have completed in that moment by making it such a meaningful lesson in your life, but now translating it to an action that you take in your daily life. With you gave your brother as the example, but I know it doesn't just stop there, Fred, because with you, it's being completely true to who you are all the time, not just when it's comfortable. And so with your brother, you say, I love you, and you do so much good in the world by helping other people to step into that next level of fulfillment in their lives by getting to know what it is that they want and need and advocating for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what fulfills me is that being able to help people to make that awareness actionable in their life. Because a lot of times the awareness comes to them, but then they still hesitate. And I just want them to realize that you have to seize the moment. I talk about this
Right.
too. I say, when people say carpe diem, you have to seize the day, and I say, yeah, you know what? To me, that's Latin for crappy advice because most opportunities aren't all day. They're a
Right.
moment.
Mhm.
There's a sometimes you have a chance to say yes or no. Somebody says, "Hey, do you want to try this?" And you go, I don't think about it. Well, no, you got to do it or you're not do it. And you go, I don't think so.
Right.
Or you say, "Let me tell you tomorrow," and tomorrow you call them and say, "Well, I'm still thinking about it," and they say, "No, that's all. That's gone. That's gone." See, I want you to seize the moments because sometimes the most precious things are that moment, that either that act of kindness or that thing that you can say to somebody that they need to hear. When you hear somebody going on and on about their life and you say, "Can I offer you something?" And you can say yes or no to that. And they say yes. And you say, "Do you realize how attached you are to being a victim?" And they go, "Oh, what are you saying? What are you saying?" I said, "I'm just pointing out what I hear. Is that and that may or not be helpful to you, but I feel like you're never the hero in your story. There's always a villain, and you're always the victim. Is that who you want to be? Because it's happening. You're succeeding if that's what you're aiming for. But um,
Right.
and that takes boldness to say that because sometimes you can't say that to your friends because the friendship's so comfortable,
Hmm.
but it hurts you. And it could be you say, like you drink way too much, you know, and I, and I love you, and I really have to say this to you is like, I, are you not concerned about how much alcohol you consume? Because there's
Hmm.
nowhere in any medical journal does it say alcohol is a necessity for your health. It says a lot of the
Right.
opposite. So a good friend is always fun to be with. A great friend calls you out when you're off track because they actually are doing the most loving thing, which is saying the hard thing, which is boldly saying the hard thing from a loving place.
And I think that the only way you can provide that to someone is by being bold enough with yourself to do that inner discovery to understand where am I, like you talked about earlier, what are my priorities? Am I living into that version of myself, or is there some work to be done here? Because once I can do that work within myself, I'm first of all much more qualified to support the other people in my life, but I'm also able to see them differently from the perspective of someone who has areas of opportunity and knows what it's like to work through them once identified. I can approach someone a little more gently, which I think is a really important thread that we've woven through this conversation about boldness. It's not necessarily coming at someone, with a hammer. It's coming at them clearly in a way that they can understand, but with some, I'm just going to say, love and understanding that person, if it is an area of opportunity that they're willing to address or that is true for them, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some effort, and that needs to be received with love. Fred, I feel like we could just talk about this for the next like 3 hours. But before we close out at least this conversation, I think a follow up one is due. But closing out this conversation, is there anything you'd like to add to this conversation? Where people can find you, your book, anything else?
Yeah, so my book is on Amazon in Kindle and Audible and hardcover. It's called Superbold, From Underconfident to Charismatic in 90 Days. A bold promise, of course, but it's full of very practical ways to build your boldness muscle, as you talked about, because boldness builds just like a muscle by straining yourself, by being uncomfortable, by being willing to fail. Because sometimes the most important rep when you're exercising is the one you can't do. That's when you
Right.
know you push yourself right to your limit. So apply
Yes.
that to something even much more significant in your life is your chasing of your dreams. So
Mhm.
uh, that's what I just want them to remember is like, get to something bold every day just to keep building that muscle and do it when the stakes are low, when the outcome is not critical, so that when it is critical, when you need to step up and speak up, you don't hesitate till the moment disappears. Seize the moment, build that muscle so you can seize the moment and have a
That's
very satisfying, impactful life.
it's a really impactful way to approach the strength training. Thank you. Fred, this has just been a delight. You always are. I love our conversations. Like I said, I definitely want to do this again. And thank you so much
Yeah,
for being here today.
my pleasure, Chelsea. It's been great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you joining me for today's episode. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show to help you create the life you truly desire.